How's it going, fam? Welcome back to Erica's EDC, and today we are going to make a very controversial video. I'm really excited about it. I've been collecting data and opinions and experiences for quite some time on this subject, and I think I have enough to present to you guys. So we're going to hop right into it. I do have the flu, so I probably sound horrible, but I'm just really excited to kind of share this with you, share my findings. So today we're going to talk about blade steel, geometry, and basically marketing knives toward specific audiences. And we're going to talk about people that maybe create knives, market them toward a certain audience, and they don't actually do anything productive, okay? That's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to, crap on anybody. It's just facts, and I am going to bring some analytical data into it, and I have a whole notebook here of notes that we are going to refer to. Okay, so in the world of knives, there are so many different steels. There are so many different makers. We have makers that have been doing this for, so many years, like Ernest Emerson, okay? And then we have newer makers that have been kind of lingering around the community for a very long time, and they are just starting to get into knife making, like Steve Kalari from Kalari Custom Knives. You guys probably know him as Super Steel Steve, okay? He's been in the game for a long time, but he's only been making knives within the past year, I think. There's a whole spectrum of people who are in the knife community that make knives. And generally what happens is they tend to make a specific genre of knife, and then they market that toward a specific audience. So for example, with Emerson Knives, we all know that Ernest Emerson does martial arts. He works with a lot of personnel from, excuse me, the military, NASA, the police force. That's his jam, right? So he makes overbuilt, thick knives with a lower tier steel, and they can really take a beating. I believe his quote on his box actually is famous in the worst places, okay? So he makes these knives that are extremely overbuilt and thick, and he uses 154 cm, and he only hardens it between 57 and 59 HRC, Rockwell, okay? And that's because he wants to be able to market these knives toward, let's say, people in the army, and maybe they're in the desert and they use a knife like this to cut open a metal can of beans, and then they can sharpen it on a rock out there if they don't have a knife sharpener and if they don't have a can opener, okay? That's his audience that he's gearing toward. He's not claiming that this knife is a great cardboard cutter. He's not claiming that this is an EDC knife. His knives are specifically made for people that are going to beat the crap out of these and treat them not even necessarily like a knife, more like a sharpened pry bar. And they are heat treated, and he uses a specific steel for that purpose, okay? And then we have makers that really like to focus on edge retention and geometry and cutting performance, right? So if we take like Steve Kalari from Kalari Custom Knives, he was a chef for I believe over a decade. So geometry and cutting performance are really in the forefront of his mind, even when he makes EDC knives. So he's going to make knives generally with a higher blade height. They're going to thin out more, and he's going to be using steels like MagnaCut and 3V that have really good edge retention, and the thinner you make them, the better the edge retention is, whether you're using a chef's knife or an EDC knife, okay? So Steve makes chef knives, and then he also makes EDC knives, and they, because they're for EDC, have qualities, geometry, and blade steel-wise that are going to give the customer the best experience. And even in the production world, the mass production world, like with Spyderco makes knives for everyone, whether it's EDC knives like this or for military personnel, but Spyderco will choose the right steel and the geometry and the blade thickness, the blade stock thickness, to gear toward a specific audience, right? So The Native 5 lightweight comes in all different steels. You can really try whatever you want, but I think they make like a police knife that's really, really long, and I think they only use S30V on it because that just makes more sense for that purpose. And then there are some makers that solely rely on marketing to get their knives to anyone that'll take them, really. So, not going to use any names, but there's a company that makes knives, and right now they have a knife out that is made in Magna Cut. I believe the HRC is 60, which is pretty low. They claim that they run it that low for toughness. However, the blade, I think, is probably as thick as this. Maybe a little thinner, but it's dang near as thick as that. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's the issue with that? The issue is when you don't make any sense. So, if you have a knife this thick, and you're using a steel that has very good toughness, why would you run the blade this thick and at such a low HRC? Why would you do that? Because you could go way thinner with Magna Cut, put it at 63, and you're not compromising toughness. So, in my opinion, the people that do that, it's kind of like it's almost like a lazy move. You know, you're saving time and money, and you're almost gypping your customers because it makes no sense. You could thin that Magna Cut blade out way more, bump the hardness up, and give us better edge retention, and you're still not losing any toughness. It's almost like a lazy move to do that, right? So, I have encountered a situation with a knife through my testing where I think this is a prime example of that happening, and this is not to take business away from this maker. This is not to, cause a fire. This is to create an educational discussion that I think is necessary to help this maker improve. This here is the Jeff Davidson Gecko in 80 CRV2 steel. If you are not aware, 80 CRV2 steel is a spring steel from the automotive industry. It's a very low alloy steel. It has basically, no carbide. It has great lateral strength, okay? And the edge retention is pretty poor. Now, a lot of old-time makers use 80 CRV2 steel to make thick overbuilt blades that a lot of people use in like tactical situations, like batoning through logs and doing campfire stuff, okay? So 80 CRV2 steel, not only is it not made for knives, but it just has poor edge retention. So for a knife, for cutting purposes, it's really not the best choice. It's also very cheap to purchase. So if we're going to use 80 CRV2 steel in a knife, the only pro that you can add to it is that it's going to have good lateral strength and good toughness. So in my head, the only type of knife you should be making with 80 CRV2 steel is a bushcraft knife. Something, or a hunting knife, okay? Something where you're going to be relying on this knife not for cutting performance, but for toughness and lateral strength in case you hit bone or something, or maybe you're batoning logs for a fire when you're camping, okay? That's where 80 CRV2 is going to be appropriate, or maybe in a combat knife where you're not actually going to use it for cutting very often, but maybe you carry it and train with it, or you think someday you're going to have to use it in a combat situation, okay? So this PBK knife is in 80 CRV2 steel. And you can see that this is a pretty long knife. It's obviously made for hunting, but it's also made for, it's almost like a camp knife too, okay? It's got the length for it, blade stock thickness, and this is a knife that you could use on a hunting trip, and it could do anything from batoning logs to processing a deer. And those are tasks where you are not relying on edge retention, you are relying on geometry, grind, and toughness to get through your tasks. Do I think you could do better than ADC or V2 steel for those same tasks? Yes. But if you're trying to make a nice knife with a lower price, sure, use it. This knife comes in at $225. It is way longer and larger and with a way better geometry than the Gecko. And it's in the same steel and the same quality. This is, handmade here in the USA, all hand done by Alan from Primitive Bear Knives. It's absolutely stunning. Excuse me. There's nothing that this falls short on, okay? This is a gorgeous piece. And this makes sense to me, right? Like I said, could you have done it in Magna Cut? Yes, but if you're trying to keep the price down, still give a product that is tough, great. So this makes sense to me. $225, like I said, way longer, way more options for tasks with this, okay? These actually look like they have nearly the same blade thickness. Look at that. All right. So this makes sense. And like I said, $225, okay? Then we have the Gecko. Now, this is where I'm confused. This has a very thick blade stock, okay? So right there, I'm confused because this, and it has nowhere to really thin out, okay? So right off the bat, even just based off of blade stock thickness, this is not going to be a great cutter because ADC or V2 steel does not have good edge retention. We don't have the height like that PBK knife to thin out to at least help us geometry-wise, okay? This is also a very tiny knife. It is 6.625 inches long, so very small. Has a drop point blade shape, kind of like a Sabenza. They're really similar, see? It's really lightweight, 2.2 ounces, I think. Okay, so this is, to me, an EDC knife. This is not something that you're going to be bringing out into the woods relying on for batoning, processing game, whittling, making fires, okay? So bushcraft hunting already out the window, right? Because it's not appropriate for that. So that leaves us with what? EDC? EDC? Okay. So this is an EDC knife now. It's a fixed blade EDC knife. An EDC knife, in my opinion, across the board, the goal should be edge retention, because in everyday carry, most people are going to be cutting open packages, processing cardboard, cutting maybe like rope or zip ties or something like that, okay? And your goal as a maker should be edge retention for an EDC knife, okay? So how is it that this EDC knife, right, is coming in at $265 with ADC or V2 steel that doesn't hold an edge very well at all? That's where does this fit into the community? I'm asking because I'm confused. And through talking with the maker on and off, he just keeps saying, well, old bladesmiths from the ABS say that this is a good steel, so I'm not going to change my opinion and I stand by the price. Okay, but we can't just say that just because these old makers with old ideals, just because they like the steel doesn't mean that now in modern day time it's relevant, okay? How is it that this knife that has way more potential to use is $225 at the same quality, and then you shrink it down to this tiny thing and this ups the price and it's in the same steel and it's not even close to as usable? That's something I want to bring awareness to on the channel. That's why we do the month of testing, because this right here is what I try to catch. I try to catch this. I try to catch marketing schemes. And I'm not saying this is a marketing scheme, but I try to catch where people maybe are kind of skating through, hoping nobody catches how it doesn't make sense, and they just kind of keep going with it, right? Another argument from the maker was, and I quote, "Guys, this is not a production knife. This is a handmade in Texas, hand-finished knife." Okay, but so is this. This is from the Carolinas. So is this. Still cheaper. Steve literally does everything by hand. He even does the edge by hand, and this guy was claiming that he did, but I saw maybe he used his hands to run it on a belt or a wheel. But in my head, hand done edge means you used a stone or a system. You did not use a machine. So Steve literally, with his hands and no machinery, does the edge. He freehand sharpens these edges. This is the same quality. I mean, look at this thing. This is immaculate. Handmade, hand finished, hand everything done in Georgia. You have way more opportunity to use this compared to this. Still cheaper, right? So tell me where this makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And if it doesn't, then just admit that it doesn't, right? Because we have makers who do that. So let's bring in John from BGM Knives. I've known John forever. This is a mini spade, double hollow ground in 80 CRV2 steel. I don't think he actually offers this steel anymore because I went on the website this morning, and generally where it would say 52100/80 CRV2 steel for his lowest pricing for steel, that wasn't an option anymore. It was just 52100. But it used to be on John's site, it would say 52100/80 CRV2 steel, and that was like the cheapest steel option you could get on his website. And he knew that, and he made that very clear that it was a cheap option. It would patina. Did not have great edge retention, but toughness wise it was good. And then from there, sorry, just looking at my notes here. So it was 52100/80 CRV2 steel. Then it's Nitro V, then 3V, then Crewwear, then MagnaCut, and they are listed from cheapest and increasing in price because you're getting better performance, but you have to pay the price for that better performance, okay? So if we have makers that are literally saying to you, hey, I'll use 80 CRV2, but you have to realize it's not the best performing. Like, I like that transparency. And like I said, it's not even on there anymore, so maybe he's not using it. But if you're going to use these steels and you know that they're not the best performers, at least make it known, right? Like, I love the way that John went about that. Because in reality, 52100 is a bearing steel. Like I said, I took notes, so let's just industrial bearings. That's what 52100 was made for, not for knives, right? And 80 CRV2 was made for springs in the automotive industry and circular saw blades, okay? So that is literally telling us this is not made for knives. You can use it for a knife, but it's not going to necessarily cut like a knife because it's not, oh, that was close. That's not what it was made for. You're getting good lateral strength with those because that's what they were made for, was strength and wear resistance, okay? Not edge retention. So my whole point here is that you can't have your hands in every single bucket. It's not how it works. It's not honest, and it's not transparent. You have to, if you're going to have like a niche little spot in the community, you have to make it known, because you can't say that your knife is going to do everything well. Because if you choose a steel that doesn't do that doesn't, it's not fair to the consumers, right? So let's even talk about Maximit real quick. Maximit was made for steel rollers, I believe. And then Spyderco was like, hey, let's just try to make a blade out of it, right? Maximit. This is a really hard steel. And their first go around, it didn't do well because it was chipping and people were breaking it. There were pictures floating around the internet for quite some time of people who put like a little bit of strength on this tip, and then right through here where you see that grind line, the blade would just snap off. So from what I have seen and heard, they revisited the heat treat, and now, they're running, I think, like 65 or 67. They don't tend to break as often, and the edge retention is just out of this world. Like, go look it up anywhere. Maximit is one of the best edge retention knives ever. Toughness is horrible, we all know that. But if you're looking for simply edge retention, Maximit is stupid how long it will cut for, okay? But you're not seeing knives made out of Maximate for like hunters, for instance, right? That I guarantee you won't find one because that doesn't make any sense, right? So nobody is taking Maximate and trying to make a hunting knife out of it because it wouldn't work very well. We need transparency in this community, guys, okay? Pick the right steel for the job. There's no reason that we should be using ADC or V2 in this knife. Not for $265. So, what's the solution? Well, lower the price. Would I pay $120? Maybe. I would pay $120 for this knife if it was an ADC or V2 steel. Because that makes sense to me. If I can buy an LT right knife for $109 shipped with a sheath, an A2 that has better edge retention and same flawless fit and finish, made in the States, hand done everything. If I can buy this for $109, yeah, I would take like a polished G10, same quality, same tiny little knife in a steel that's not going to cut that great for like $120. Okay? Other option, change the steel. If you want to charge $265 for a knife, you need to give us a steel that's going to cut. Okay? So 3V, MagnaCut, even like a well done S45VN, like cryo treated, I don't know. Guys, this isn't fair to consumers because it doesn't work. Like, I'm trying to make this knife work and it just doesn't. And people are like, well, maybe it's the heat treat. No, it's not. It's just the steel. Look at it. If you look at the charts, I'm pretty positive that ADC or V2 literally falls below $10.95 for edge retention. Okay? Like, come on. $265, there's no way that you can justify this making sense because it doesn't have a spot anywhere. It doesn't fit into this category. Doesn't fit into this category. It surely doesn't keep up with this. So that was the point of this video, okay? I'm just looking at my notes here, trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. I don't think I did. I want this to be a discussion, though, and I want to hear your thoughts. Would you, as a consumer, pay $265 for a little tiny knife that doesn't cut very well? I'm curious. And for people saying like, oh, well, maybe it's a hunting knife. Come on. Come on. Would you bring this on your hunt? No, probably not. It doesn't even have the right blade shape. It doesn't have enough belly to be a hunting knife, guys. This isn't something that you could bring on your hunt and rely on out in the woods to process an entire elk, I don't think. I really don't. It doesn't even have the right blade shape. This is kind of a hybrid, right, of like a bushcraft hunting knife. But look at the difference. Look at how much belly you have on this and that clip point. You got that blade height. You have that geometry helping you because ADC or V2 steel doesn't have great edge retention. So Allen has these, full flat ground. Geometry is going to play a huge part in helping you with this knife. But look at the difference. Look at the difference. This is called the Hunter's EDC. This doesn't even have the proper blade shape, okay? So where does this fit? If we are taking everything into consideration, price, blade steel, geometry, where does it fit? I can't find it. I cannot find where that fits. It doesn't seem proper to me. It doesn't seem appropriate. I mean, I guess maybe a third option would be thinning this out like crazy and trying to rely on geometry to help you cut through things. This is way too thick. It has nowhere to thin out. It's not even full flat ground. If we bring in this Joe Calton blade here, okay, this is in 1095, hand done here in the States, handmade by a master bladesmith or something. Look at how paper thin that is. Look at how thin that is. I almost think I could, you can. Let me see if I can catch this on camera. I can wiggle this blade. Oh, wrong way, okay. It's flexible. This is a knife that you could bring out and process game with. Is it in a high edge retention blade steel? No, it's in 1095. It's in 1095. But you have geometry that is appropriate where this is going to help you move through material for longer because it's so thin, okay? If you're going to make knives, I genuinely think if you want to do it the right way, you have to make sure everything lines up. Expense, blade steel, geometry, all that stuff. Otherwise, it is not fair to your customers, okay? And if you want to use old steels that old makers from the ABS use, then you have to make knives that correlate with that. If you want to use old steels like 1095 or 1075 like Essie does, you have to make knives that are appropriate, okay? So this makes sense. This is a little bushcraft backup knife. It's thick, right? It's overbuilt, it's beefy. And literally Essie like pushes their customers to beat the crap out of these and like pry with them and do messed up stuff, and if you break it, you just send it in and they send you a brand new one, no questions asked, and they put the broken ones up on a wall somewhere. That's their audience, is people that beat the living crap out of these things. Right? Because that's what the steel calls for. So I want this to be a discussion down below. Am I crazy? Or do you think that $265 for a knife that doesn't cut very well makes not a lot of sense? Let me know down in the comments, okay? I've been talking over voice message a lot with Steve from Kalari Custom Knives, and he is right there with me. You can't have your hand in all the buckets and expect to just skate through with no questions asked, okay? When push comes to shove, I'm testing this and it's just not hanging, and not everything I test and review is going to work. This doesn't work so far. I'll sharpen it, see what happens, but the steel itself is not a knife steel and it doesn't perform like a knife. So there are options that you could use. Throw Magnica on this, thin it out, that makes sense. So far it doesn't make sense, so I know Steve will chime in because I've been talking a lot with him about this particular subject, and it's nice to have someone that really makes high performance knives. It's nice to have someone in your corner like that has the metallurgy experience and knowledge to add to this discussion. That's all I've got for you guys today. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Go use your shit. Learn how to sharpen your knives. I will see you on the next video. I love you guys so much. Take care.